Thank you for braving cold elements to be with us this evening. I think you're in for a real treat. My name is Dave Behrs, and as president of St. Mary of the Woods College, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our campus. Before I begin my remarks, I would like us to take a moment and bow our heads and pray for all those men and women who have served our country, regardless of what force or branch you're in. We honor those who are serving, we honor those who have gone before us. A moment of silence, if you would. Thank you. It is our privilege to have Lieutenant General Martin Berndt, his wife Diana, and 1967 distinguished alumna Mary Pat Kelly with us tonight. It is our hope that through activities such as this one this evening, we will let the world know that St. Mary of the Woods College is a military-friendly institution. St. Mary of the Woods College participation in the Yellow Ribbon program, when combined with the post-9/11 GI Bill, means that veterans who have served on active duty for at least 36 aggregate months since 9/11 and who meet college admissions requirements will have the opportunity to attend St. Mary of the Woods College tuition-free. This is open to all branches of the military. We are also pleased to announce the new Sister Catherine Hartman Spiritual Companionship Program. The Sisters of Providence are partnering with St. Mary of the Woods College by offering an optional spiritual companion to any veteran who enrolls in an academic program at the Woods. They will offer ongoing visits with a Sister of Providence companion at the time a student may be on campus, as well as ongoing visits via email or letters. Both of these programs are intended to assist our fine service men and women who have given so much to our country, an opportunity to experience the unique value of a Woods education for virtually no out-of-pocket expense. We thank you for joining us tonight and want to extend an invitation to you to join us again tomorrow morning as we hold a wreath-laying ceremony in honor of Sister Catherine Hartman, who was a second lieutenant in the Women's Reserve of the United States Marine Corps during World War II. The ceremony will begin at 10 a.m. and will be held in the Sisters of Providence Cemetery just on the east side of campus. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mary Pat Kelly, who earned her bachelor's degree in English from St. Mary of the Woods College in 1967, and last year, during our commencement ceremony, was honored with the 2009 Distinguished Alumna Award. Mary Pat holds a PhD from the City University of New York. She is a wonderful author and filmmaker. Her award-winning PBS documentaries and accompanying books include To Live for Ireland, Home Away from Home, The Yanks in Ireland, and Proudly We Served, The Men of the USS Mason. She wrote and directed the dramatic feature film Proud, based on the USS Mason's story. And she has written 2 books about Martin Scorsese, The First Decade, and Martin Scorsese, A Journey. Mary Pat wrote a novel, Special Intentions, and she is a frequent contributor to Irish America magazine. Mary Pat has been on a national book tour with her most recent book, Galway Bay, and we had the privilege of having her here in April to share that with us. Mary Pat is again with us tonight, and as the author of Good to Go, The Rescue of Scott O'Grady from Bosnia, which tells the story of Lieutenant General Martin Berndt, who led the rescue. We welcome back home Mary Pat Kelly.
Thank you. It's always good to come back home. Dave was very generous in giving my credits, but actually the thing that I'm proudest of wasn't anything I achieved. It was an honor I was given by the Marines, the enlisted Marines, when they invited me to be the guest of honor at the Marine Corps Birthday Ball in Stuttgart. And the historian of the group found that I was the only civilian female ever to be a guest of honor at the Marine Corps Birthday Ball, which is a great honor, and it involves really delicious cake, and you get the first piece. I do. So I'm really this whole connection with the Marines has been a wonderful and enriching thing for me, and it's very much connected to Providence. And from the first time I met General Berndt and Diana, all I dreamt about was getting them down to St. Mary of the Woods, because their spirit and the spirit that I met and the people with them was so like us, so like the people that this place has nurtured. And now there's a full biography of General Berndt in the materials that are being given out tomorrow at the ceremony. So I'm just going to hit the high points, because as Dave said, he's the real deal. I mean, we're very honored to have him here. He served 36 years in the Marine Corps, retired in 2005. But to me, the almost more heroic thing is his wife Diana moved 24 times in the 36 years. And I know for a fact that she used to completely set up the house after every move so that their 3 children would feel at home in their new surroundings and have their own bedrooms to go to. And one of the things I've really learned in my experience getting to know the Bernds and the Marines is the amazing, amazing what the wives and spouses do, what the families do. I mean, and that was when we got to know each other, it was peacetime. I mean, what is going on now with these young women seeing their husbands and gone for, you know, a year and then going back after a year. I was so pleased that the First Lady Michelle Obama took military families as her special cause, because it's just amazing. So Diana, you know, thanks so much for coming. So I do have, now let me just give a few of the highlights. General Berndt was commander of U.S. Marine Forces Atlantic, which means like the whole country east of the Mississippi. And if that wasn't enough, commander U.S. Marine Forces Europe, right? Then commander U.S. Marine Forces South. I mean, you know, this is huge. Then he would be joint commander, so he wouldn't just be commander of the Marines, he'd be commander of the Army and the Navy, and each one of them doing an amazing job and serving this country in a way that I always was proud to know them. But I want to go back a little bit to where I met him. In 1995, you might remember the story, a young pilot was shot down over Bosnia, Scott O'Grady. And he was missing for 6 days. And the country, it was, as I said, this was peacetime, and we really hadn't gone through the sense that we have right now of all our young men and women serving. So to have one of our own shot down in hostile territory and be gone for 5 and 6 days, and I think the fear was that he was going to be captured or his body was going to be dragged through the streets that just had happened in Somalia. And then all of a sudden was the great news, he'd been rescued. And at the time, I had been working on a book about the Navy, and I had gotten to know this Admiral Leighton Smith, Snuffy Smith to his friends. And here's Snuffy Smith on television talking about the rescue and that Scott O'Grady was home safely. So I had called him up to congratulate him, and he said to me in this very southern accent, "Mary Pat, you got to write about this, because the media is focusing on Scott O'Grady, and the story was the Marines that went in to rescue him." So within a few days, I was on the USS Kearsarge. It's an LHD. I've got to say that because the people who know are here. But to us, it was like an aircraft carrier. It was a big ship with helicopters and 2,500 Marines and 2,500 Navy, of which there was one woman besides me. And so I was, I arrive, and I'm going to interview the Marines and get to know them a little bit and write. I didn't know an article, a story, but I'm trying to do what Admiral Smith told me and do the Marines. And I was just so impressed by these young men. There were no women with them that time. This is 95. And their dedication, and there was no place for me to stay except in the isolation room on the hospital deck, right? So, I mean, it was like the Waltons. I would say, good night, Sergeant, good night, Private, good night, and I go into my little room. And then there'd be a knock on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was the Marine that was going to take me around that day to meet different people. Now, we're anchored off the Adriatic, and there was Bosnia, there was all this stuff going on. But he wanted me to meet everybody, but I'd get up in the morning and you'd have the smell of cinnamon rolls baking and the coffee, and then you'd work really hard all day, but then you'd have, at night you'd sit around and you'd talk about life. and philosophy. And I was so impressed as I would interview each different part of the people that went on the rescue, the combat, the aviation, the pilots, just that their competence. And then as I got to know them better, their sense of vocation and their dedication. And then we'd walk on the deck. It was, you know, it was in the Adriatic, and we'd walk on the deck and talk. And I kept having this sense of deja vu. I said, I've had this experience before. What was it? And then I realized the Marines were just like the Sisters of Providence. It was like being in the novitiate again, really. And I continue to feel that way. Their honor, their courage, their commitment, the sense of vocation, also the sense that they could just do anything. Dave very kindly talked about some of the documentaries and the films that I've done. You don't know how many times I just wish, I thought, oh, if I just had 5 nuns, you know. I have one of my band members here, and Sister Denise too, and the things we used to pull off, right? I mean, we could get 200 chairs set up in the courtyard in 10 minutes. And the Marines are just like that. I mean, that's why to have the Sisters of Providence and the Marines together, I mean, really. And the ideals were the same. And one of the most profound things that General Berndt said to me that I always remember, and I put him back in time so that a Civil War fighter could say it in Galway Bay, is, no one wants peace more than a soldier who's been in combat. And it would be so wonderful if St. Mary the Woods College could become a place, particularly on campus, where women Marines who had served 3 or 4 tours of duty in Iraq or Afghanistan could come to this place that has always been a place of healing and nurturing, and benefit from the wisdom of the women that are here, and just have the sense. And this was my fantasy one day as I was walking through the graveyard, and I look at a tombstone that says, Sister Catherine Hartman, 2nd Lieutenant U.S. Marine Corps, World War II. I just couldn't believe it. And this is the 65th anniversary of the end of World War II. And I feel we're all instruments of Providence, and this moment is really a moment of great joy for me. So I would like to, and you can get all his other credentials and medals, I mean, he's got medals, you know, and heroics, but the most wonderful thing about him is, I think, that statement, that no one wants peace more than a soldier who's been in combat. And the sense that I saw in them when they went after Scott O'Grady, it reminded me of the Bible story, what man who has 100 sheep and loses one doesn't leave the 99 and go to bring the one home safe. And General Berndt has brought many people home safely and has kept our country safe and has served with Diana for all these years and continues to. So, General Martin Berndt.
If anybody thinks that speaking in public can be a challenge, try doing that after Dr. Mary Pat Kelly does an introduction. Dr. Behrs and Sisters of Providence, and of course Dr. Kelly and Diana, and I see a few Marines out there. It's really a great honor for me to come here and spend a little bit. Dr. Behrs and Sisters of Providence, and of course Dr. Kelly and Diana, and I see a few Marines out there. It's really a great honor for me to come here and spend a little bit of time with you over the course of about 24 hours. I hope that everybody that's going to come here tonight is already here, because I saw a sign on the door as I came in that said, "Please enter the auditorium only during applause." And in that there's not likely to be much, anybody that's out there will be out there in the cold for about the next 45 minutes or so. I've been asked to talk about education and leadership. And as I look out in this group of wonderful people, I'm not sure that I can tell you anything you don't already know. I mean, I'm still learning about the importance of education and the value of leadership, and still don't have it right. As a matter of fact, Diana and I were out in San Diego last couple of weeks at Camp Pendleton, and I had an opportunity to take a walk on the beach one evening, and as I did, I kicked something in the sand, and looked at it, and then for a moment I thought it kind of looked brassy, and so I picked it up, and sure enough, it was an oil lamp. Hadn't seen one of these in years. And I recalled that there have been some stories about people that had found oil lamps and that they rubbed them and magical things happened. So I figured, what the hey, I'll give it a try. So I rubbed it, and after a couple of seconds, this huge, 10-story high purple genie came out of this lantern. He had a turban on, and he had these fluffy trousers on, the whole bit. And he said, hey, Berndt, this is your lucky day. You found the lantern, and I'm here to guarantee you your one and only wish. And I was shocked and surprised, but pleased as well, and said, well, I understand Dr. Behrs is going to Ireland in June and July, and he's going to take some people with him. And I love to go to Ireland as well, but I really don't like to fly. So I guess my wish would be for you to build a bridge between New York and Ireland so that I can drive over rather than fly. And the genie paused for a moment, and he said, well, it's your wish, but I'd like you to think about this a little bit. How many thousands of tons of concrete do you think this is going to take, and how many miles of rebar? And just think about the labor. This is going to be a huge job to build this road so you could drive to Ireland. Give it another thought. And knowing that I was coming here, I said, okay, well, I'm going to come and talk to this wonderful group of people about education and leadership, and quite frankly, I don't know anything about either one of them. So could you please make me smarter so that I can impart some words of wisdom about education and leadership? And the genie paused for a moment and looked down at me, and he said, well, do you want that to be a 2-lane or 3-lane highway to Ireland? So I'm kind of stuck with what I got, okay? As Mary said, I've been privileged to serve as a Marine for 36 years and continue to try to contribute to our youngsters that are going in harm's way. And I'm proud of that. I don't regret a moment of it. Despite the 24 moves and the difficulties associated with that, I have absolutely no regrets. But I have made some observations that I'm going to share with you for what they're worth, okay? And again, I'm not going to tell most of you anything that you don't know, but these are kind of random thoughts. It's kind of stray voltage, but these are things that I've kind of observed. But first of all, let's define this thing, education. Webster says education, the noun, is the knowledge and development resulting from an educational process. That can be formal, and that can be otherwise. Here in this environment, we have an absolutely wonderful formal education process that goes beyond the formal to the informal. And those of you that have been around for a few years recognize that sometimes the informal education that you get, from talking to people, to watching things happen, to reading about it, to experiencing things yourselves, can be just as important to your education as a formal education process. And whether you know it or not, we're educated each and every day, almost every hour. And we describe this in kind of a circle. And it's maybe something you hadn't thought about, but this is kind of the way it works. First you observe, and then you assess or analyze. And then you sort through all of that, and then you make a decision, and then you do something with that decision. That's kind of the educational process that, at least the way I grew up. And it seems to work pretty well. Now, that decision that you make at the end of that process, having observed and assessed and decided, may be to do nothing. On the other hand, it may be to take some action, and that action will be the result of either a formal or informal education process. It can take place on an athletic field. It can take place in a classroom, in an organization, in a club. It can take place by reading, researching, studying. You get it. You understand all that. But it's focused on what you can learn from others who have made mistakes and enjoyed success. And those of us that have spent some time in service to our country recognize how important that can be. Leadership. Let's talk about the verb lead. Webster says, to guide on a way, especially by going in advance, to direct on a course or in a direction. What can I say about that? Well, When a young man or woman shows up at a Marine Corps recruit depot after they get off the bus, they're in total shock for a reason, but that's another story. But they step off that bus and they step onto something we call the yellow footsteps. And they're painted on the ground, and they come off the bus and they stand there. And from that point on, through the entire time that they spend in uniform and beyond, they're learning. And they're learning about becoming leaders. And as a result of the recognition of that fact, this institution, your institution called the Marine Corps, has developed leadership traits and characteristics that are taught to every Marine from right after he or she gets their first haircut until the day they die. And I just want to cover some of them with you. I've amended them slightly for a broader audience, but bear with me, and I think many of these things will ring true in your own personal lives. Leadership principles. Know yourself and seek self-improvement. Know yourself and seek self-improvement. Be technically and tactically proficient. I can see some mouths moving back here, these Marines, because they've grown up with these things. Develop a sense of responsibility among your subordinates. Make sound and timely decisions. Set the example. Know your people and look out for their welfare. Keep your people informed. Seek responsibility and take responsibility for your actions. Ensure assigned tasks are understood, supervised, and accomplished. And incidentally, supervision is not a four-letter word. Train your people as a team. Employ your command, or those under your influence, in accordance with its capabilities. Now, they're pretty simple and straightforward, aren't they? There's nothing magic about any of those. But if you adhere to them and you believe in them, you'll recognize that we believe, and you should too, that there are two kinds of Marines. There are leaders, and there are those training and learning to become leaders. They're the only kinds there are. There are no others. Leadership traits. Dependability. The certainty of proper performance of duty. Bearing. Creating a favorable impression in carriage, appearance, and personal conduct at all times. Courage. The mental quality that recognizes fear of danger or criticism, but enables one person to proceed in the face of it with calmness and firmness. Decisiveness. The ability to make decisions promptly and to announce them in a clear, forceful manner. Endurance. The mental and physical stamina measured by the ability to withstand pain, fatigue, stress, and hardship. Enthusiasm. The display of sincere interest and exuberance in the performance of duty. Initiative. Taking action in the absence of direction from above. Integrity. What I believe to be the most important characteristic. The uprightness of character and soundness of moral principles includes the qualities of truthfulness and honesty. Judgment. The ability to weigh facts and possible solutions on which to base sound decisions. Justice. Giving reward and punishment according to merits of the case in question. The ability to administer a system of rewards and punishment impartially and consistently. Knowledge. The understanding of a science or an art. The range of one's information, including professional knowledge and an understanding of your people. Tact. The ability to deal with others without creating offense. Unselfishness or selflessness. Avoidance of providing for one's own comfort and personal advancement at the expense of others. And finally, loyalty. The quality of faithfulness to country, the organization, to one's seniors, subordinates, and peers. Okay. Again, I didn't give you anything you didn't already know. Let me talk about a couple of examples. First, perhaps a not so good example of leadership, and then to one out of thousands that we could talk about that I think is pretty positive. Have any of you watched the TV show called The Office? I think some of the younger people have probably watched it. I watch it for a number of reasons. Diana hates it. She won't watch it. But I watch it because I think it's really insightful, the way the folks that have put this show together have created the characters. There's this guy by the name of Michael Scott. He's the regional manager of a paper company called Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And he's played by an actor called Steve Carell. This guy doesn't get it, okay? He just simply doesn't get it. He's put in a position of responsibility, but does not have a clue on how to lead. He ignores all the things that we just talked about here. He's oblivious to them. He goes his own way. And I recognized that, but I didn't realize that the writers did as well. So I did a little research to find out what the writers said about this character, Michael Scott. Let me read to you what they say. Michael insists everyone in the office think of him as a friend first, a boss second, and probably an entertainer third. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not the kind of guy that I would follow to the men's room. Michael holds inflated views of himself and considers himself an office comedian, but his attempts at humor tend to fail. He often he says things that are inappropriate, offensive, or unwittingly mean in the hopes of getting a laugh. He lacks maturity and self-awareness, has few friends, and is quite lonely, made worse because his efforts to make friends with people usually backfires. Michael will resort to any means possible to make himself the center of attention, and often takes credit for the successes of others. His subordinates, with one exception, think of him as inept, and several of them remark that they get their work done when Michael is distracted. Michael wasn't always an incompetent employee at Dunder Mifflin. Before he was promoted to regional manager, he was a great salesman, able to relate well with clients and using his personal attitude to his advantage. However, his promotion put him into a position above his level of competence, making him an embodiment of the Peter Principle. If you get an opportunity and you ever want to see the way leaders shouldn't deal with their subordinates, watch The Office. If you want a good laugh, watch The Office too, because it's really pretty comical. I have no interest in the show, but it is educational. All right. There are thousands of examples that we could use of solid leaders. And I picked one that will be very familiar to the Marines because this fellow is the most decorated Marine of all times. And it's not because of his decorations and the awards that he's won over the years that I think he can be pointed to as a significant leader, but because of the way he dealt with people. Louis Burwell Puller, born in 1898, passed away in 1971. He was an officer in the United States Marine Corps, but he was also an enlisted man. He is the most decorated U.S. Marine in history and the only Marine to receive the Navy Cross 5 times. The Navy Cross is the Marine Corps and the Navy's second highest award below the Medal of Honor. He also had a Distinguished Cross given to him by the Army. But he's an interesting character. There are a lot of stories about him, but one of them that I like is that at one point in time he was passing a second lieutenant who had reprimanded a young private for not properly saluting. And the lieutenant was causing the private to salute 100 times. And as Chesty Puller passed by, he said, look, you're absolutely right for calling attention to the fact that this Marine improperly saluted, but don't forget, for every salute he gives, you must return. And made that lieutenant salute 100 times. Chesty Puller had an unfortunate accident, something we called an accidental discharge with a .45 weapon while he was in Hawaii. And the fine for doing that, this is prior to Korea, the fine for doing that was $20. Well, he fined himself $100 instead of the $20 that was the going rate. He was really an incredible character, and there are 1,000 quotes attributable to him. Many of them are myths, many of them are not. But he deeply cared for his people, and his people would have followed him everywhere and anywhere. He never put himself first. He was totally selfless. He had tremendous courage, not just physical but moral. And so he has become an icon and a legend for the Corps and will for as long as the United States Marine Corps exists. I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions if you like, but let me just give you, this is really stray voltage, but let me just give you some final thoughts on education and leadership. And they're kind of one-liners, but I hope you get the point. The first one is extremely important, and I put it right up at the top of the list with integrity. And that is, it's simply not about you. And what do I mean by that? I mean that as a leader, everything that you do and think and say has got to be focused on your people, not yourself. It's not about you. It's not about how you succeed, how many promotions you get, what awards you receive, how much more money you make. It's not about that. It's about your people and the mission, and we try to keep that always forefront in our minds. Don't ever task your subordinates to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Don't ever confuse enthusiasm with capability, and there can easily be a tendency to do that. We've all perhaps worked with people who've got tremendous enthusiasm, but when the rubber meets the road, there's not a lot there. Don't confuse the two. Don't be afraid to supervise. As I said before, it's not a four-letter word. And inspect what you expect. Listen to subordinates. In 2010, and for the years to come, we may very well find out that the people that are the most critical thinkers, the folks that have insights that others don't have, maybe that fellow that was in high school and had the pen protector in his pocket and the glasses on crooked with one earpiece broken and always kind of disheveled. But these people bring qualities that you really can't overlook. So we're searching high and low to find these talents and use them appropriately, recognizing that everybody's got their own. Listen to subordinates. Never promise what you can't or won't deliver. If you say you're going to do it, you darn well better do it. Delegate authority along with responsibility. Don't just give somebody a task to be responsible for something without the authority to make it happen. Pass credit for success to subordinates, always. Praise in public, correct in private. You don't become a leader by merely assuming a position. This guy in the office thinks he did just that. Good leaders do everything well. Not just one thing, but everything well. And so do the units or organizations that they're responsible for. Good leaders inspire team enthusiasm and energy to get the job done. Good organizations function equally well when the leader is absent. And finally, good leaders develop others to be leaders. Now, I don't know a lot about either one of these things, but I know there's a clear connection between education and leadership. Whether it be formal or informal education, nonetheless, we're constantly learning. And what we learn, what we see, what we read, what we research, what we observe, assess, decide, and act on are things that make us better people. Someone who's not willing to learn, not willing to get smarter, not willing to pay attention, thinks they know it all, cannot possibly ever be a truly good leader. On the other hand, we need to recognize the fact that everybody has leadership qualities. Everybody. They may not be what you need at that particular time, that particular place, but they're there. And one of the keys, perhaps, is to uncover those, identify them, and be able to call them forward when necessary. Marines that have been in combat, and there are many in this room who have, recognize that sometimes the fellow that steps forward and is willing to give his life for others is the most unseemly character you could imagine. You never would have guessed it. You never would have thought he had it in him. A true hero. And in doing that, in being a hero in those instances, a true leader, because they inspire all of us. Anyhow, nobody came in because there was no applause. That's the good news. I don't expect any. Again, I'm very thankful to be here and just share some of this stuff with you. I'm certainly, I'm not an expert in any of this, but I've had some wonderful experiences that allowed me to kind of do that, observe, assess, decide, and act thing, and hopefully it's paid off for for all of us as American citizens and for the country. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about or ask? Feel free. If I know the answer, I'll give it to you. If I don't, I'll lie to you. Yes, Dr. Kelly.
No, could you just talk about two of those ones that you talk about? The idea of inspecting what you expect, and just, what was the other one? Oh, about reprimanding in private,
Yeah.
that whole thing.
One of the things that we teach leaders, I think, across the board is that ridicule, being called down, being addressed for some inappropriate act in front of others can have a tremendous impact on individuals. And quite frankly, we ignore that at boot camp for a reason. But beyond that, I think there's a recognition that if you need to correct someone and you can do it privately, you're going to get a better response than if you do it in public, where you have that pressure of others having seen you called down, who may tend to put you in a different bucket than you were in before. So we try to the extent that we can to, if someone does a good job, point it out to everybody. If somebody screws something up, take him or her aside and explain why they screwed it up and how they could do better, and hopefully they will. But to do it in public sometimes can backfire on you. Inspect and expect are two different words with two very different meanings, but essentially what I mean by that is just because you want something to happen as a leader or a manager or in a position of some type of authority, just because you expect something to happen doesn't necessarily mean it's going to unfold the way you want it to unfold. And so you're going to get, at the end of the day, what you inspect, which may be very different than what you expected. And I also mentioned that supervision is not a four-letter word. Supervision is the Marine Corps' last troop leading step. And I'm not talking about over supervision. I'm not talking about doing somebody else's job. I'm not talking about getting in their way and not letting them run the course and run with the ball and have success. I'm just saying that supervision is not a bad thing. And most youngsters will agree that supervision is an important part of their educational process. They have to have it. So supervision is not a four-letter word. Over supervision is, but supervision is not. And you will truly get what you inspect, which may or may not be what you expect. Does that help? Any others?
Could you talk a little bit about the planning and preparation for the O'Grady rescue?
Sure. Thanks for the question. The question was, can I talk a little bit about the planning and execution for the rescue of Captain Scott O'Grady? And I'll just give you the nickel version. If you really want to have all the insights, there's this great book written by this gal by the name of Dr. Mary Pat Kelly called Good to Go, where she actually interviewed hundreds of people and recorded them and collated all of that. And it does a much better job than I can ever do of describing everything that took place here. But the short version of that is that while we were exercising with some Italians, we got word that he had been shot down. And one of the missions of the unit at the time was to be able to do a tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel, or a TRAP mission, which means that you essentially go in and get equipment that has been lost or people that have been lost and bring them back to safety. That was one of the missions. And so we had trained for it. We knew exactly what needed to be done. The Marines and sailors associated with that knew everything they could do. And we practiced these drills as soon as he was shot down, even though we were not on tap to go and do anything about it. We just recognized we had a skill set that might come into play. So we practiced and practiced and practiced. Everything from getting out of your rack, putting on your equipment, going down, having your ammunition issued, test firing your weapons, getting in your sticks to get on helicopters. Everything that was practiced over and over and over again in total blackness on the ship. We turn all the lights out and make people do it so they could do it routinely, just as a matter of rote. And everybody knew exactly what their job was and when they had to do it, with no expectation that it was going to happen. We just didn't know. And then one evening, I happened to be listening to a tactical net, and I heard Captain O'Grady very weakly on the other side, and kind of monitored this discussion. So we called together a group of people who do the planning, and we have been doing the planning all the way along, brought them together, put them in something we call the war room on the ship, and we kind of finalized our plans. Again, not knowing that we would ever be called, just in case, because there were people who were perhaps better trained to do this than we were, and they were stationed ashore in Italy, on the Adriatic, but on the eastern side of Italy. But we thought, well, we just probably need to get ready here. And some of our aviation planners had worked this, and they knew exactly where they thought he would. They figured the wind, they figured the time of day, they figured that where he had punched out, if he was alive, this is probably where he would be. So we had a pretty good idea as to where it was. And to make a long story short, got a call from the same Admiral Snuffy Smith, who was the commander of naval forces in that part of the world. And he said, we've got communications with him. What do you think? And it was still nighttime, but we knew that if we did this, we were going to have to do it during the daytime. So we got our heads together. I asked the pilots, what do you think? I asked everybody, are we good to go? We got this all wired together. Can we make it happen? And went back to Admiral Smith and said, we're ready to go. In between time, they had contacted the other forces that were better trained and better equipped to do this. And they said, we can't do it during daylight hours. We have to wait till nighttime. We weren't that smart. We said, hey, there's a kid out there that needs some help. We know we got this together. Everybody's well-trained and ready to go. And so I told him, yeah, we're ready to do this. And he said, okay, go ahead and do it. Now, there are all kinds of other things related to that, but the bottom line was people who were properly equipped, properly trained, and properly led did exactly what they were expected to do because they were inspected over and over again, and they were supervised, and they were taught, and they were trained, and people cared for them and wanted them to be successful, just like everything else that we do. We want them to succeed. So when the time comes and they have to do what they're trained to do, what they're mentally prepared to do, what they're morally prepared to do, all you do is pull the trigger and get out of the way. Because it's going to happen. I mean, these youngsters know exactly what they have to do. And it's just a thrill to watch them. It was a thrill to be associated with them, and it turned out well. It could not have turned out as well. And we often think, you know, they shot a bunch of missiles at us on the way out of Bosnia, and they shot up one of the helicopters with some small arms. And you can't help but think, we could have lost 40, 50 Marines trying to save one. But roll the dice. I mean, that's what you do. So everybody was okay with it. It worked out fine. No problems. The folks that were sure that wouldn't do it at night didn't like us very much. But that's the way it goes. Does that answer your question? Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for sharing. I think you know a lot about leadership and education. Everything that you said resonated with me, but I had a question about one, and that was that a leader should do, I don't want to misquote you, should do everything perfectly?
No, not quite perfectly. None of us are there yet. But a good leader does everything well. And what I mean by that is that, let's look at an organization rather than an individual, because the organizations are led by someone, so I think you can kind of connect the dots. A good organization can conduct protocol functions as well as they can educational functions, and they can do parades as well, and they can conduct concerts as well, and they can recruit athletes, and they can recruit academic students for the academic environment. They can build a faculty. They can build administration. They do all of those things well. A truly good organization does everything well. And we found that to be true over and over and over again. If you go to an organization and you're conducting some type of inspection or just observing them, and there are a couple things that they really kick into the stands, that they just don't get it, chances are pretty good that there are probably a lot of other things that they're not getting right as well. So what we say is a good leader does everything well. A good organization does everything well. It's not just we do real well at this, but we stink at everything else, because that's not truly a good organization. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any others? Yes, sir.
Just wondering if you could speak to the possible career paths for women who may want to go in the Corps.
Well, they're all coming right here to college, right? That's the plan. We talked a little bit about this at dinner, and this is where I think those of you that may not be directly associated with St. Mary of the Woods can really help. This great program has been put together by the university, by the college, to kind of bring in female veterans who have, as the doctor mentioned, served 36 aggregate months on active duty, is just incredible. When I think about the benefits that are available, not just to our returning veterans, but in some cases to their spouses as well, you got to go, wow. And when you look at this campus and you look at the faculty and you look at the role of the Sisters of Providence, you kind of go, what more would you want that you don't see here? And so the whole idea is, I think, to get some of these young gals who have served us all so well over the last few years and bring them in and give them a formal education at virtually no expense. I think that makes us a better country. And, oh, by the way, it only takes a couple. It only takes a couple to get that ball rolling, because that internet of Marines who have served together that takes place kind of in the background that we're not aware of unless you're on the inner loop is so important and influences things in so many ways and people in so many ways. So my advice, and I'm going to do what I can to make sure that that the gals that are leaving the service and are interested in furthering their formal education consider this great atmosphere, because, like I said, I'm not sure what else you would be looking for that you can't find here, so why not give it a shot? And, oh, by the way, I think we'll all be better off for it. Does that answer your question, Dr. Evans? Any others? Okay, well, listen, I don't profess to be an expert in any of this stuff. I'm not. I probably never will be, but we're always learning. We're always being educated, and we all, I think, aspire to some leadership role in our lives. And I've been fortunate enough to be put in positions where leadership was a requirement, and hopefully I haven't kicked it too far into the stands. If not, I thank you for the opportunity to serve you, and on behalf of, as Dr. Berndt